like watching anime. At least until I grew up. And then I had no time to watch anime. To fill that empty void, I started reading webtoons instead, because webtoons are smaller in scale and much easier to consume, plus they are free. For the most part, but as someone who may be new to webtoons, you might not know where to begin, or you just happen to be looking for a new webtoon to read. Whatever the reason, this video is here to recommend webtoons that might interest you. And to make sure this video is as comprehensive as it can be, I'll be going through as many genres as I can to guarantee that there will be at least one webtoon made just for you. I will be recommending what I consider to be my favorite webtoon of each genre, briefly going over what that webtoon is about, and then talking about why I love it so much. But before we begin, let me set the record and state that webtoon is just one platform, not an entire medium, meaning that not every webcomic or manhwa is available to read on the app. So if there is one that is not on webtoon, or if there is a webtoon that you recommend and is not brought up in this video, then please do comment them down below. I think many people would appreciate having more to read, as well as myself. And with that, let us begin with the first recommendation. Sometimes what you want in your media is just pure action. And some heart. Because what better action is out there than action done for the sake of your loved ones? Like your dog. That is why I'm going to recommend Teenage Mercenary. Teenage Mercenary is about Ijin Yu, who survived a plane crash at a young age, but was then brought up as a child mercenary in a foreign land until he found his way back home to Korea. Now reunited with his family, Ijin strives to live a peaceful life as an ordinary high school student, but when trouble arises for his friends and family, he must use his skills as a mercenary to protect his loved ones at all costs. If I were to pitch this webtoon after having downed 3 shots of vodka, I would say that Teenage Mercenary is the webtoon incarnation of that Vin Diesel family meme. This man Ijin just wants to protect his family, and he does so by beating down his opponents, blackmailing politicians, and cooking a hearty meal for his grandpa and sister. Honestly, pretty badass of him. Even though the narrative can be rather formulaic, the way Teenage Mercenary incorporates each character into the story makes reading feel rewarding, showing how Ijin has impacted their lives in some way, because beneath all that bloodshed, Ijin only wants what is best for those around him, including his own enemies. So you want to see a man just beating people up from the bottom of his heart? Then I would highly recommend Teenage Mercenary.
Adventure time! Come on, grab your friends, we'll go.
Adventure can mean many things, from journeys through a world made of dreams and fantasies, to experiences that many would rather not think back on, like puberty. But because I'm sure no one wants to think of the latter, I am going to recommend Hooky, which involves teenagers, most likely going through puberty. Hooky is about a pair of twins named Danny and Dorian Witt, who also happens to be witches. After missing their ride to magic school, the two decide to pursue their own paths in becoming fully fledged witches, traveling around the world and undertaking many fantastical feats, until they learn that there was more to witches than they had ever known, and suddenly, the innocent lives that they once knew were soon to be met with conflict. Now, this was one of the first webtoons I've ever read, and admittedly, it has been some time since I had last read it. So forgive me if I forget the details, but from what I remember, this was an endearing story that explored a unique world of humans and witches, following a colorful cast of characters who each have their own reasons to go on this adventure, and see things through to its end. Filled to the brim not only with many wholesome stories but with just as many dark turns, Hooky is sure to leave you with a memorable adventure with what I consider to be one of the most memorable art styles in any webtoon I've ever read, which is why I highly recommend this.
Memes. The DNA of the soul.
Comedy is, what's the word? Subjective. Things that would make me laugh might not make you laugh, and vice versa, which is probably why I am, not funny. But if you are looking for something that might give you a quick chuckle, I would recommend Toaster Dude. Toaster Dude is about a dude named Dude who just wants a toaster. And once he gets a toaster, he loses the toaster. And then he becomes John Wick. Sorry if that was vague, but really, this is a rather simple webtoon that I think is best read with as little context as possible. The comedy in Toaster Dude is what I would consider as subversive comedy, though I imagine the official term to be parody, but I use subversive because that's what Toaster Dude is all about. Subverting your expectations at every second, which leaves you guessing what will happen next and makes you chuckle every single time. At least for me it did. Again, comedy is subjective, but based on my own taste, I would recommend Toaster Dude.
Get in, loser, we're going shopping.
I will admit that drama is one of, if not my least favorite genre in media, so you may need to take my recommendation with a grain of salt. But if there is one drama that I love to this day, then the webtoon I would recommend is Odd Girl Out. Odd Girl Out is about Nari Oh, a young girl who is entering high school for her first time. And as someone who lacks self-confidence in both her appearance and personality, Nari was surprised when the first few friends she manages to make happen to be some of the most popular girls in her class. And as the one girl who is often seen as the odd girl out, Nari goes on to endure the walls of high school to slowly, but surely, gain confidence in herself. Odd Girl Out has one of my favorite cast of characters in any webtoon. Each character has their own background in which the narratives make sure to explore with due time, revealing their strengths, their flaws, their interests, their motivations. You literally see these characters grow on the pages as you continue reading, and you cannot help but fall in love with them. Of course, this is still a drama at the end of the day, so the story is not all just rainbows and sunshine. Rather, there is an appropriate amount of spice that makes you feel for these characters and their struggles, but it makes it all the more satisfying as you see them try again and again to push through and find their resolve in the end, even when said resolve is not perfect. So without a shadow of a doubt, I highly recommend Odd Girl Out. Going to the fantasy catalog in Webtoons is like having to choose between two pills. On one hand, you have power fantasies of an overpowered male protagonist, and on the other, romance stories led by a cunning villainess. So pick your poison. No? Then should I recommend a personal favorite of mine? What about The Ember Knight? The Ember Knight tells the story of Na-gyun, one of the two twin brothers who witnesses the murder of his fellow sibling right before his eyes. Now on the road of vengeance, Na-gyun takes on the identity of his brother Na-jin and undergoes his training as an apprentice knight. One problem, however, he is not even half the knight his brother was, barely being able to fend for himself in a fight, but what he lacks in strength, he makes up for in intelligence. As he has to keep his identity a secret, but pursuing those who changed the course of his life that very night. Rather than being about impressive displays of action and magic, the Ember Knight instead has a larger emphasis on the smaller moments, whether it be a scuffle between members of warring factions, or even a conversation between supposed allies. Na-gyun as a main character does not have much to offer in terms of raw strength, but no action scene could ever match the intensity of any scene involving him, as he makes full use of his limited resources to outwit even the most dangerous of foes. Enemies capable of wiping out entire mountainsides in an instant. One wrong move, and his revenge is as good as gone. This is my personal favorite webtoon, one I look forward to reading every single week. And if you are in need of an amazing fantasy story, then I highly recommend The Ember Knight.
Welcome to the Kill Count, where we tally up the victims and all our favorite.
Horror can come in many forms. Most often, horror is depicted in the art of film. Some others are displayed in the form of video games. But no medium can ever compare to the worst horror of them all: live action adaptations. I recommend Sweet Home, the webtoon, not the Netflix show. Sweet Home is about Cha Hyun-soo, an ignorant young man whose life was turned on its head when his family died in a car accident. Now having to fend for himself, Hyun moves into a desolate apartment, forced to live off what remained of his family's inheritance, with no sense of direction whatsoever. And just when he began to entertain the thought of suicide, the world had suddenly fallen into chaos, and this apartment he would have killed himself in had suddenly become his only salvation in the upcoming apocalypse. Reading Sweet Home made me feel anxious. Just the way the panels are laid out in this simple format, sometimes even reusing the same frame for the next 3 or so panels, is enough to horrify you with every little action. Even when the act of peeing makes you sit on the edge of your seat, wondering whether or not this character is going to die due to the human need to urinate. You understood just how well this webtoon captures horror in its rawest form. And not just horror either. Sweet Home is also a story about the human self, how we are faced with the monster inside of us, preying on our thoughts, our emotions, our weaknesses, our traumas. Sweet Home is not for the faintest of hearts, but the story on display here is nothing short of incredible, which is why I highly recommend it.
Emotional, damn it!
Psychological stories come from the same vein as horror stories, but with more emotional damage, which is ironic given that this webtoon I'm going to recommend comes from the same vein as the webtoon I recommended for the horror category. From the same minds he wrote Sweet Home, I recommend you Bastard. Bastard is about a son and his father. The son, Songjin, is a young high school boy who is quiet by nature, often unnerving his fellow classmates, making him an easy target for bullying. His father, on the other hand, is the complete opposite, viewed as a man of the people, successful in all he does. Yet despite that, there's no other man that Jin fears as much as he fears his own father. And sooner than later, this facade of a man begins falling apart at the seams. A very vague synopsis, yes, but I intentionally hid as much detail as possible, since this webtoon is best read with little to no context. Even the synopsis may have revealed a tad too much, but just be aware that this is a twisted tale between a son and a father, with many dark turns that will nerve you with every passing chapter. Just like Sweet Home, this webtoon is not for the faintest of hearts, maybe even more so due to the more grounded nature. But if you are on the lookout for a story like this to read, then I would highly recommend Bastard. Well now, that was quite serious, was it not? From the Ember Knight to Sweet Home to Bastard. If I don't have emotional damage at this point, then I'm not sure how else I will. But regardless, let's line up the mood a bit and recommend something that's less depressing, like a romance webtoon. Because yes, I do like reading about cute couples doing cute things when I myself am not in a relationship. Never mind, this is probably the most depressing recommendation of them all. But no worries, because I'm sure Romance 101 will make me forget what it's like being lonely. Right? Romance 101 tells the story of Param and her pursuit of romance, but with her schedule being occupied with things such as school, she can barely fit in the time or effort to do so. That is, when she encounters Jaehyun, another student who invited her to his programming club. Having fallen for him, Param obliges and joins the club with no hesitation, but as soon as she finds out, her pursuit of romance may not be as simple as she believes it to be. Romance 101 does hurt me on a personal level, but I cannot deny, this webtoon is heckin' cute. Even though it doesn't do anything new within the genre of romance, whatever tropes it has, it does very well. Like you have your love triangle, your unrequited love, your best friend who's in Spain, but without the S. Everything you read here, you have probably read many times elsewhere. But that does not take away from what is a very cute romance story, with very cute characters, and points for featuring college students living their ordinary lives. Not often do we ever get romances within this setting. So if you are in a mood for a romance, then I highly recommend Romance 101. And now, I go back and cry some more.
Hello, everyone!
Slice of life webtoons are sort of hard to recommend, as many of them can be classified under any other genre, like comedy or romance. Really, there is no way to define what makes something a slice of life, so just be aware that my recommendation is purely based on what I like and may not be your cup of tea, because I recommend Boyfriend the Dead. Boyfriend the Dead takes place during the zombie apocalypse, but rather than following another survivor, the story instead follows a zombie, But this is no ordinary zombie, mind you. This is a zombie with taste. No random corpse is appealing enough for him to gorge on, leading him to have a human-free diet. At least until he ran into a lone survivor. A young girl whose smell was so delectable that even he would dare snack on her flesh. The only problem is, she is a strong, independent woman who will absolutely murder any zombie in her way. So much so that even the zombies have become afraid of her. But our leading zombie refuses to give up, and so he attempts to get closer to what he considers his next meal. Or so he thinks. Born from the Dead is what I like in a slice of life. Showing off a level cast of characters just doing random shenanigans, while also writing an underlying narrative that engages you the more you read, add on some comedy and even some romance, and what you have is a really satisfying read about the zombie apocalypse of all things. There are so many slice of life webtoons out there that it is hard to just recommend one, but from my personal experience, Born from the Dead is one that I will never not recommend. You might think to yourself, why would I want to read a webtoon about sports? And I say, because only in the sports medium can you convey tales of winners versus losers, effort versus talent, BL versus GL. And I rest my case, so please, read The Boxer. The Boxer tells the story of three young men. One is arrogant but naturally talented in the art of boxing, reveling in the feeling of beating down on others. Another is weak and inexperienced, but finds the drive to fight his way to the top against all odds. The last is an apathetic husk, only partaking in boxing just to see whether or not there is a reason to do so. Three characters, three paths, but only one end. And to meet that end, they will do whatever it takes to reach the top. This webtoon is not like your Haikyuu or your Space Jam. This is a story about what competition means to an individual, not only to our protagonists but also to their opponents, each with their own reason to fight in this volatile sport. And with that comes themes that study the human condition, such as themes of abuse, love, trauma, all explored with delicate care for even the darkest of subjects. Because in the end, The Boxer is not just another story about sports. The Boxer is a character study on people who come from different strokes of life, aiming for the same objective but for their own selfish reasons. Needless to say, this webtoon is not about having fun. You should be aware that the narrative can be incredibly dark, reaching to subjects that may make some readers uncomfortable, but if you're not too taken aback by the more sensitive topics, then I would say that The Boxer is an absolute must-read. You know, most of this video has been quite doom and gloom, and now that we're nearing the end, I think recommending another dark webtoon would feel rather unpleasant. So why not finish this on something wholesome? Because if there is one thing we need more in life, it is positivity. And so comes the final recommendation, the most wholesome of them all. Yeah, I recommend Tales of the Unusual. Just trust me on this one. Tales of the Unusual is unlike most webtoons, as rather than being one cohesive story, this thriller is more of an anthology, spanning over roughly 100 stories. Each story follows a certain theme, some supernatural element that drives the characters and their actions, and due to this otherworldly aspect, finishing one story and then going to another will always feel new and refreshing. Unless it is a continuation of a previous story, but those are always still fun to see. Now, because the webtoon is under the genre of thriller, you should expect most of the stories to be on the darker side. Not dark as in serious, but you know, dark as in scary, right? Just the occasional murder and stuff, not too many trigger warnings here. But even among these darker stories, there are surprisingly some wholesome ones as well. In fact, some of my favorites are the more wholesome ones because, well, I like feeling nice. See, what did I tell you? Tales of the Unusual is wholesome. Just ignore the other 90 or so stories that are the complete opposite of wholesome. But even then, they are all very entertaining, which is why this webtoon has my recommendation. But that is what I consider to be the best webtoons you should read from every genre. Again, all this is just my own personal opinion, which may greatly differ from your own. So if you have a webtoon to recommend, do comment them down below. I think I speak for all of us when I say that the more webtoons there are to read, the better it is for everyone. So please, do share. If you liked the video, then please do leave a like. If not, then a dislike will do. And subscribe to the channel if you want more of these random videos on my hobbies. Now go out there and do not get cancelled. Until next time.